2NURFM's Health and Wellbeing. For our sponsor, Mullen Natural Health Centre, Hamilton.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Peter Mullen. How are you, mate?
Well, thank you, Colin.
That's the way. Today we are talking about, of course, children, and the food intolerance that takes place in today's society. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, look, it's a growing area as well, Colin.
And I suppose as a parent, well, kids, they don't come with a owner's manual, with an instruction manual.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, particularly when they get to teenagers. I could do with early 20s. I could do with a new manual now.
Would you like me to write one?
I think we might have to have a show on that and just get people's advice because constantly changing our kids.
Now, just before we get too far, just tonight, if people are trying to plan out their evening, as many people are, you've got a kids' health talk happening tonight.
Yeah, we've got a great talk on tonight for anyone that has kids or knows kids that do have health issues. It's a great talk even for people that have healthy kids but want to learn more about what they can do. A big part of our focus is to help encourage parents to be more confident in managing their kids' health themselves, trusting their gut instinct, listening to what they know is right. So, yeah, we've still got some seats available tonight at Charlestown. Beautiful. And if people get onto our website at www.mullenhealth, then they can get online and book it. It's a free ticket, and starts at 7 o'clock. So
beautiful. All right. Now, as a parent, I suppose you kind of have to rely on your gut instinct, doesn't it, when it comes to your child? And as a naturopath, you would often see that things can be a little difficult sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, it's as I was saying, like we've sort of lost that confidence in treating our kids ourselves. When I was a kid, if we had colds or sniffles or whatever, I think we got vitamin C and flat lemonade. For some reason, warm flat lemonade was a miracle cure, which is probably the sugar content might have helped. But parents basically treated us themselves. We didn't rush off to the doctors and get Panadol and antihistamines and antibiotics and all the medications. So there's been a big push for all these ads on TV recommending that if their parents, if your kids have this or your kids have that, the normal thing to do is go and get child-friendly medication, which possibly aren't so child-friendly. So everyone's taking these drugs advertised on TV by sports stars. That really, it's not really looking at number one, why that child's sick in the first place, and number two, all you're really doing is treating symptoms. So tonight our talk is a lot about that. Anyway, so with food intolerances, our food affects us a lot more than what we realise, particularly because our diets change so much, and just as a race, as a population in the West, we're eating a lot more processed foods. So a good example is I had a client come to see me, or a mum come to see me with her child just recently, and the child had been diagnosed by the doctor as having stomach migraines. And stomach migraines are an unusual diagnosis because scientifically there's no real blood test you can do. It's based more on symptoms, and it's where you're getting like a gut ache or a pain in the tummy that occurs can be months. So the doctor had prescribed an antihistamine that would be a long-term treatment, maybe 2 or 3 years, and told that that's going to fix the problem, and there was no advice around diet or anything else. So we did a test that we do looking at food intolerances, found out the child was intolerant to gluten, dairy and eggs, had moderate to severe intolerances in those areas. When the mum cut those foods out, tummy pain went away. I also prescribed some magnesium because magnesium's great. Well, magnesium is my secret weapon for anyone that gets migraines. Anyone that gets regular migraines, I would always put them on magnesium. So we gave the child some child dose of magnesium, and basically not a problem since. So that was just an example of how, say, a food intolerance was causing the problem, but unless you look further rather than just treat the symptoms, you weren't going to get a resolution. It would have resulted in long-term medication. Yeah. So, in food intolerances, there's everybody's familiar with allergies, and one of the things that I often say is our kids' health is changing a lot. You only have to look at the number of kids now that their school and their daycare and their preschool are all nut-free because everybody's developing these nut allergies. So kids are becoming more allergic. But allergies, usually if your child has an allergy because it's an immediate reaction. Same with adults. If you're allergic to peanuts, you'll start to get it the throat close over straight away. If you're allergic to mowing the grass, you'll break out in rashes or hives. So allergies, they're an IgE response. It's an immediate response, and most times you know what they are. Intolerances are different. Intolerances are an IgG immune response. The symptoms can take, they might be 1 hour to 6 hours, even 72 hours later. So they're harder to track. The most common food intolerance for kids that we find are things like, unfortunately, most kids' diets. So it's your gluten, dairy, eggs come back fairly high, nuts, and also yeast as well. Now, unfortunately, if your kid's having Wheat Bix with milk for breakfast, a sandwich with, meat or chicken or Vegemite for lunch, you're getting the yeast in the bread, and then for dinner, maybe having or something with eggs in it or more pasta. Yeah. You can sort of see that if the child's continuously eating those foods regularly, like it's a big part of our Western diet, then they're not going to feel any better. And if you can imagine as an adult, if you're getting gut symptoms like irritable bowel or bloating or just being discomforted in the tummy, you really don't feel well. So that's, and again, we always look at the gut and everything else, the brain and the nervous system. But yeah, so intolerances, cause is not fully understood, but they do tend to occur more when there is an imbalance in the good and bad gut bacteria or overexposure to certain foods, which is what I'm finding with a lot of kids that have challenges, is that they eat the same foods over and over.
10 signs that your child has a food intolerance, and they can start off with things like tummy pain.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier on, like, a diagnosis of stomach migraine, which is really tummy pain. And keep in mind that, that all of these cross over to adults as well.
Yeah.
So tummy pain, symptoms of IBS, there's often food intolerance involved, so that can be, things like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, like that, bowel variability, leaky gut, we've talked about before on this show, which is kind of IBS, but IBS where you're actually getting toxins crossing into the system from the gut. Interestingly, skin problems like eczema. Yeah. And even hives, and I'd also include, asthma and sinus and hay fever, but we sort of think of eczema as being a skin problem, but it's actually an immune problem. And again, the biggest area where our immune system sits is in that tissue surrounding the gut. So if a child's having a reaction to, say, gluten or dairy, and they're prone towards eczema, that may be one of the triggers. Hives also. Headaches, again, as I was saying before, one of my favourite remedies for anyone that gets any sort of headaches is magnesium. However, headaches definitely can relate back to what someone's eating, particularly if they've got food intolerance. Insomnia, and insomnia particularly related to gut symptoms, gut pain, bloating, wind, but also, one of the things a lot of my clients are sort of talking about lately, particularly in regards to gut health, is brain fog. So if you're an adult and you sort of get a bit of brain fog sometimes, imagine if that was happening in a small child's head. But also that, just that unsettled feeling, that overactive mind, that can all relate back to intolerances and aggravate sleep problems. Muscle aches and joint pain. One of my other clients at the moment, a young lady, if she eats gluten, she gets excruciating pain in her knees, and I can't relate why. I can't understand why that would happen. But when she cuts gluten out, she doesn't get any leg pain. And this is leg pain that causes her then not to be able to sleep. It's quite bizarre, but she's definitely got a strong intolerance to gluten. And then also behavioural problems. And actually, just back to that, one of my patients quite a long time ago was seeing his orthopaedic surgeon for looking at some knee replacements, I think. He had quite severe osteoarthritis. His orthopaedic surgeon at the time recommended to him, have you tried cutting gluten out of your diet? So, interesting. Everyone's different. But
definitely.
And then number 10 is behavioural issues, hyperactivity, poor concentration, and mood swings.
What's the quickest way to find out if your child has got a food intolerance?
Look, there's a number of ways you can do it. Like the old-fashioned way, or and this can be quite good if it's quite complex, is to do an elimination diet. The challenge is we'll often start people with an elimination diet, but I might leave in eggs and rice. There's also a blood test you can have done. It's a pinprick, and it checks for 43 different foods, including gluten, dairy. And often when we've done that with people, they've come back intolerant to rice and eggs. So the unfortunate thing when you do an elimination diet is you still could be eating foods that you're reactive to. So these days we tend to recommend patients get like the pinprick blood test. They can go online and check it out. But basically it's a pinprick, checks 43 foods, and you get the results back, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, and for a lot of young mums that come to see us, or mums generally, they'd rather have a list of the foods that they need to steer clear of, rather than start with a whole heap of avoidances and then to be able to test them all back in down the track.
Tell me more about how we can help our children cope with food intolerance.
Well, I guess once you've worked out what foods your child is more reactive to, and sometimes sometimes you'll know that if they have certain foods that their behaviour might change, or they're going to complain of a tummy ache or a headache. So oftentimes the blood test is good. If you can get a blood test done, it's good because it just gives you that confirmation. When you're making dietary change, though, with kids, like the biggest challenge for mums and parents is helping kids to change their diet, because kids seem to be so much more restrictive with what they'll eat and so much fussier these days for all sorts of reasons. So if your child comes back with food intolerances, the whole family really needs to adopt that way of eating. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. There's no point having things in the fridge that your child can't have that the rest of the family has. So, and to be honest, if one child's reactive to say, dairy, then dairy is going to be an issue probably for everybody. So it's worthwhile cutting it out for a period of time and just seeing if you notice improvements right across the board. So eating the same food as they eat. Be creative. The idea is not to make your child feel restricted, use it as an opportunity to try new things and get creative with food swaps. Lettuce cups instead of bread, coconut yogurt, etc. If you can get your kids on board and they're happy to try new things, that makes the whole process a lot easier. Often it's the dads that need more encouragement to change as well, as just the kids. And use your wider support network. Like on our website, we've got some great recipes. We've got actually Carly, one of our naturopaths who's been on the radio show before, is doing a free, we're calling it Secret Mother's Business.
Of course, don't forget the Kids Talk tonight. If you want more information, just head up to our website, and there'll be a link there on the homepage to go through. So we'll go from there. Don't forget you can catch this program as a podcast also. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Mullen.
Thank you, Colin.
Not a problem.
See you next week.
Yep.